Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo podcast. I'm here with returning guest Kau'ilani Morehead, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and me, Angelo Ferrer. If you haven't seen me before, I'm a Kajikimo black belt, also a brown belt, assistant coach in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and also a MMA coach. Coming out of Japan. I never asked you last time. Where are you coming out of? I think I mentioned at the end of the show in the last episode.
Yeah.
Where's your academy at?
Our academy is in Clark Fork, Idaho.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you are. Coming out of Clark Fork, Idaho. So you saw the title. No sparring for white belts? WTF. What is going on here? So let's just get started. So some schools will say that sparring is an essential part of martial arts, and specifically for jiu-jitsu, it is essential for white belts to know what's going on. You have to feel the jiu-jitsu, as some of the other jiu-jitsu greats have said. But some have also said that, hey, there's a high risk of injury, and maybe sparring for white belts isn't something that should be done. We're here to talk about all the ins and outs of this, and with that being said, let's find out what Kau'ilani has to say about it. What's going on, man? So what's going on? Are they sparring or not sparring? Are they sparring or not sparring?
No sparring for white belts. No. That was something that I've had to make the decision on, and I'm not looking at it just from a jiu-jitsu standpoint. I'm looking at it from the other black belts or instructorships that I have in other martial arts. And for the full gambit of martial arts in general, no sparring. I don't believe it anymore. I started in jiu-jitsu and all the other martial arts. I started in jiu-jitsu what they call kind of the Pohara days, where it was a fight school. So I remember distinctly my first day of jiu-jitsu, I got beat up, and I got beat up bad. And it made me go, oh crap, I got to learn this. I have to learn this jiu-jitsu stuff. But I kind of look at that as I was one of the few that was a martial artist already, or kind of one of those maybe too dumb for my own good of I need to learn this, where 90% of the rest of the population, if they were in my shoes when I first started, they would have said, I don't want to continue with this. There was no reason for this to happen. So I'm against rolling for white belts.
What? Well, I guess you brought up a few good points there. You said you already came from another martial art, and you said if someone's coming in from an art that didn't have anything, or they didn't have any experience, that this could be a turnoff for them. And I've heard other podcasts of other people, other jiu-jitsu instructors talk about how when they back in the day, they used to have the Gracie introduction video that when they were doing the cookie cutter approach to jiu-jitsu, they would bring in a student, they'd pop in it wasn't a DVD, I think it might have even been a VHS or early days of the DVD. They'd pop it in and leave the student watching that while they go teach class before they got their initial class. And in that video there'd be footage of who was it? Who was the the UFC one. They'd have footage of UFC one and of Royce Gracie sitting there fighting, and then they would have like a lion and a gazelle. And the lion's like attacking a gazelle, and I guess the point of the video was that you were going to be a lion. You come in here, you train, you're going to be a lion. But the guy was laughing while he was saying this, because this would happen, and then sometimes they'd come back and there'd be the student that they left in there would be gone. Like they'd walk out while watching the introduction, because it was like a little too much. Just watching the video was a little too much. So me personally, I came in already with a certain set of skills, as Liam Nelson would have put it. I already knew how to fight. So when I came into jiu-jitsu, they tried to throw. I accepted the fact that they threw a white belt on me. I'm not going to go somewhere else, and make force them to acknowledge whatever I have. So they threw a white belt on me, but I already had a fight coming up. So I was like, hey, I find I don't mind wearing white belt. But then they said white belts couldn't spar. They told me that. And I was like, all right, guys, I'll let you know right now. I won't spar here. If those are your rules and that's what you're saying. And then I can only do positional sparring. And I'm gonna ask you about that in a sec. I can only do positional sparring. Then I'm just gonna let you know right now that I'll follow your rules while I'm here, but as soon as I'm not here and you're all on my social media, I'm fighting, so I can't do that. Like I need to spar.
Yeah.
I really need someone coming at me because in 6 weeks I have someone coming at me.
Sure.
But I think one of the things that we got to make real clear right now is you're talking about someone with no experience, like their first day, no past experience coming into jiu-jitsu. Is that
No, so I'm talking for everybody.
okay?
Everybody. It doesn't matter if you come in as a wrestler, if you come in as a judo guy, it doesn't matter. Nobody rolls as a white belt. And kind of like we were talking about our last podcast on the culture of the school, nobody rolls until they learn the culture of the school and the culture of the environment of the jiu-jitsu that we're offering, as well as the other martial arts that we're offering at our academy. We see too many times. So I blame this directly on the MMA and Brazilian jiu-jitsu culture of today's world. Nothing against like the sport of those things. I competed in both of them and I loved both of them. But the biggest thing in those two worlds today is all about ego, right? It's a very egotistical world of those two sports. And we see too many times that these sports are breeding a culture of lions, like you mentioned, right? And a person walking in that either doesn't know anything or does know stuff, I don't know what they don't know, right? And they don't know what we know. So if I just have somebody come in and start rolling, even with experience, I don't know if this person came from some place that they were taught to just go super hard and smash somebody. Where if I put them with one of my blue belts who just started rolling, a few months ago, right when as they got their blue belts, I don't know what to expect because I've got stay-at-home moms that train in my academy. I've got guys that work behind cubicles. I'm not gonna allow some high school wrestler come in and just start ripping on necks and stuff, not knowing what they're doing or what we're doing.
And then when you say roll, are you including in that of the other, are you including positional sparring? So no positional sparring at all, or just drills? What is
So that's still a different thing. I'm talking Randori. I'm talking sparring in general, whether it's striking, whether it's grappling, all of sparring is not included for our white belts or beginners.
okay? So you just gave me a lot to break down. All right, so okay, so when you say no sparring, you're referring to free sparring. You're referring to free sparring and then for those of you who don't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, free sparring in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is where both players start standing up. Free sparring in MMA is where both fighters start standing up. In other words, the what you would normally see in a match, in either a jiu-jitsu match or an MMA fight, referee comes in, says fight, and jiu-jitsu they say start, and they start going at it, and they start in a standing position. So that's just I'm all about definitions here. So you're first of all you're saying no free sparring, no obviously no free MMA sparring, and you're also saying no free jiu-jitsu sparring. Does this include what we would define as positional sparring, meaning you're in one position like close guard, and the person is given specific instructions? It almost seems like well, it is a drill actually. It doesn't seem like a drill. It is a drill. You're in one position, the person's told you can only use XYZ, and the person on bottom can only use XYZ. Concrete examples for anybody watching. The person on the bottom is told no submissions. You can only do a sweep. And specifically, if it's a higher ranked student, they can only do one sweep, the one that they covered in class. That way the higher ranking student can work on that one sweep. Person on top, if they're a little lower experienced, they tell them, okay, take it easy, go at 20%, 30%. This is not going, you're not going 100 miles per hour here. You're just going to go through. And they've most likely been shown one escape or two escapes because they have very little experience. And the person on it's kind of, no, it is said. I'd say it's unsaid. In my school, it is said. I'll tell the higher ranking student, hey, give them a chance. Pretend they are the strongest person you have ever rolled with in your life. And when they start doing stuff, don't clam on for life. Give them a chance. Let them go through the movement. Let them go through the movement. Give them some resistance. Let them go through the movement because they're a beginner.
Yeah.
Different schools do different positional sparring rules differently, but that's just a concrete example for anybody wondering what positional sparring is. Do you include that in your no sparring?
No, yeah, that's not included either. So for us, we would define that still as sparring.
Okay.
For us, positional sparring would be bad guy on bottom, good guy on top. Or let's just say one person is on the bottom in guard, the other person is on the top in guard. Person on top, your job is to pass the guard. Person on bottom, sweep, submit, or survive. That's positional rolling, positional sparring for us. And we still don't allow our beginners to do that. For us, how we start our beginners is a lot of people have done this before us and continue to do this at a very high level. What we do is in our curriculum, we have set level of techniques that the white belt is learning, right? A full lesson. And within those lessons, we have feeding. So it's based 100% for self-defense in our beginners program. And what we do is we tell, okay, bad guy, you're going to put this person in a standing guillotine. This person is now going to escape, take you down to side control. Bad guy, what I want you to do now is put them in your guard. Good guy, you need to open the guard and go to the mount. Or, hey, now you're on the bottom, I'm pinning your throat, you need to do an arm bar. And then person on bottom, you're gonna escape from that. Vice versa, however it works. For us, it's even more basic than that because everything is in quote street techniques. So that is what we do. It's a bad guy and a good guy. And the bad guy is drilling with the good guy with movement, if you will. They're not fighting each other. Everything is fed and the good guy is reacting to what is fed, and it's reaction. So bad guy feeds multiple things, good guy reacts to multiple things. It's very much so like almost like a kata, if you will. But it's just to get the beginner to understand what to do if this doesn't work or if the bad guy does this. Because time and time again, we hear white belts when they are rolling, we hear, I don't know what to do from here. Well, that's because they haven't had enough time rolling. They haven't had enough time in the techniques. So what we've done is we've made it to where this white belt is getting everything fed to them that is within the curriculum to better understand movements.
So you mentioned a bad word. How dare you say kata on my podcast? So either way. But yeah, for some of the people that just cringed a little bit when you said kata, there actually is a history of kata for judo. There's a history of it. If you look at the history of judo, which is the origination of jiu-jitsu, there was a kata. It was taught. And when they say kata, don't get too confused here. I know some of you are thinking karate, so that you're imagining there's an opponent. It was actually a two-man. It would be viewed like a two-man kata, where one person's the uke, or the bad guy, as he's saying, using some traditional terms here. In Japan, they still use the word uke in jiu-jitsu. I don't know if they do that.
We do too. We use uke ori. Yep.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that word uke is a martial arts term. Like whenever I have a new Japanese student come in, I'm like, "You're the uke." They're like, "What's?" They look at me like, "Is that English?" I'm like, "It's Japanese." They're like, "No, it's not." And then all the Japanese people in class are like, "Yes, it is." It's like, "Oh, we just taught you a new word," Yeah. So anyway, it's a two-man thing. One person is fed the technique, everything he just explained, and now so the other question is then, while you're doing this, how long does this beginner, and you're saying everyone has to do this, whether they come from an MMA background or a wrestling background, whether they want to fight later or not, everybody has to go through this. How long do they have to do that kind of practice until they get to spar?
So the way we do things is everybody has to test for their ranks. And we do things a little bit different than everybody else. A lot of people, they get ranked based off of this white belt is beating all the other white belts, therefore they deserve a blue belt. Or this white belt has won a bunch of competitions, give them their blue belt. We don't do it that way. What we do is we have our set curriculum, and this person goes through this curriculum. They cycle through the curriculum until they show a level of proficiency within the curriculum, and then they test for it. It could take 6 to 8 months, but within this curriculum, it is everybody is judged based on their personal journey within the curriculum. So again, if I have a high school athlete that comes in, they will understand and their bodies will be able to do the moves a little bit better than, say, one of my 73-year-old white belts that are training with us. So yes, there's a set curriculum that everybody has to learn, but it's based off of the individual and how they are doing it for their bodies, for their injuries, all of that stuff. So it takes a student for us anywhere from 6 to 8 months. Sometimes it could be a little bit shorter. Sometimes it can be a little bit longer. It just depends.
So what do you do with someone like when I had to come in for my fight? I was looking for a place to roll because I had a fight coming up.
Yeah.
And I needed a place to practice for about 6 weeks out of a fight. What do you do with a fighter that comes in and says that?
We tell them, hey, learn the curriculum. And it's not, I was told this by a gentleman, and I'll give you his name. His name is Jake Johnston.
No, don't do that. Are you sure you can do that? All
Yeah,
right.
I can do that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
he gave me some really good advice, and he said, "Don't have to learn the curriculum. I get to learn the curriculum, right?" And what I took from that was a lot of these people that are higher level athletes or competitors, they come in and they get told, "Well, you have to learn this very basic thing," and a lot of people go, "What do you mean I have to learn that basic thing? I'm above that." No, you're not, right? Even black belts. Like for me, I'm a black belt, and I'm a white belt mindset, right? So with fighters that come in, I explain to them how this curriculum that we're giving beginners actually works very, very well for them in the cage, right? So just for MMA fighters, for instance, like a lot of my MMA fighters, if you watch their fights, they're doing our fundamental curriculum in the cage at a very high level. If you look at people like Hodger Gracie, his jiu-jitsu looks very basic, but it's very complex. There's another quote that says, I'm trying to remember it. I'm paraphrasing, but my master understanding of the basics will always trump your basic understanding of the advanced techniques, right? So when somebody comes in and tells me that, I explain to them how it's beneficial for them and how you could, a person could cycle through it quicker. If you can demonstrate that you can do our test for our particular school in a good fashion, get a 98 percentile on the test, then great, you get to move on.
Okay. All right. So it's not like you send them away. You don't tell them, "Hey, sorry, you got to go somewhere else." You're saying like if they can pass the test, then they can continue to get what they need for whatever fighting. If you have a fighter come in for that in that situation, okay,
Right.
Fair enough. So this brings me to Greg Sodders, and you said you've never heard of him.
Never heard.
There was he's in the jiu-jitsu community and he's making some waves. I first heard of him on Stephen Kesting's podcast, Strenuous Life podcast. If you haven't checked it out, Stephen Kesting is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor as well as a Kaji black belt. He mentions that once in a while. He hardly ever does though, but he does mention it once in a while. And yeah, he interviewed this guy, and I'm going to share the screen here. I found this on Sonny Brown Net, so heads up to Sonny Brown. You can check out the article there. So Greg Sodders is teaching jiu-jitsu without teaching techniques. Essentially, he in his podcast, he talks about the ecological approach to skill development. Rather than relying on memorized techniques alone, he empowers the students through practice. It's based on constraints-led learning, which focuses on the learning environment and how it can facilitate learning. He emphasizes the importance of using this approach, and he says that he feels it's way more effective for both beginners and advanced students. Now, I can't play the video because I'll get in trouble with YouTube if I do play the video. But when he was explaining it on the podcast, it sounds very much like a lot of positional sparring and a lot of sparring. It's like the opposite of what you just explained. He'll put people in a very specific position, and they're told to get out of that specific position. But it's definitely not the good guy, bad guy approach. One person is told to do one specific thing, and the other person is told to do one specific thing. Once that specific thing is done, it's finished, and then they restart and drill that one specific thing. And I'm not going to go into further detail because I don't do that approach. So I only listen to a podcast about it, so I don't want to butcher it. I'm going to keep it vague on purpose, because if anybody who does this approach says I explained it wrong, feel free to give a concrete example in the comments, is what I'll say to that person. But from his philosophy, if I understood it correctly, it's the idea of just a lot of positional drilling, really. And he has no set techniques, zero set techniques from beginning to end. It's just put them in the position, and he believed that the technique will come out. So you'll start them off in an armbar, you'll start them off in a triangle choke, and teach the escape to the triangle choke, or go over the person on top doing the escape to the triangle choke, and then they'll switch off so that the person can pick up on that one, and not specifically say this is the one way to do it, but what do you think you should do? And then coach them through what they should and shouldn't do while it's happening live. What do you think about that? That almost sounds like the opposite of everything you just said. That's why I wanted to bring it up to you.
I don't know him. I haven't looked at what he's offering, so I couldn't say anything other than I don't know him.
Yeah, before you even say another word, I'm going to be very specific. I actually like it. I think it's a cool approach. This is nothing about Greg Sodders, okay? I think that we always say in academia, attack the concept, not the person. So this is not, please don't take wherever this conversation goes, don't take this personally. This is just an opinion on the ecological method. If Greg Sodders actually got this from academia, the ecological method is in academia. It's an academic approach to teaching. And some people like it and some people don't. And that's what I want to specify before we go in this next direction. I don't know if that moved things out for you, man. I hope it did. Good.
No, I don't know him. I've never seen it or anything like that. And everybody is trying to offer something for their community that are instructors in a different way, right? So he's offering it maybe in a different way than I would, or anything like that. Good on you. If that works for you, and that you find it working, then awesome. Something I would add is what type of jujitsu in this particular case are you trying to get your students to understand, right? Again, like our last podcast, we went over the old school or self-defense jujitsu versus the new school jujitsu. To me, like, again, 99.9% of jujitsu schools are doing sport jujitsu. So I totally understand the positional rolling from there. In that context, for us, my students are learning an entire martial art. They're not learning a sport. So we run through things a little bit differently. I'm not going to say I disagree with him, because that would point fingers. I would say that we do things differently based off of what we have seen through the years of running an academy. The best way I could put it is something like this, right? Is what is the clientele you are catering to? Most people in a sport jiu-jitsu school, it's a lion's den of people, right? It's a very alpha male, alpha female environment. People are getting down. And I'm going to use this analogy, and this is the best way I can come up with it, but I don't know how well this is going to work. I don't know if I know you're in Japan, but I'm going to use a Planet Fitness versus a Gold's Gym. Okay. You ready for this one? So like a Gold's Gym, you walk in there and there's a lot of pretty juiced up, scary looking men that are in there. They're lifting weights, they're grunting, they're getting after it. And then if you go into a Planet Fitness, you look around and it's kind of just a bunch of average people. And to the athlete, they would say, well, what the hell is this? Like this is a bunch of people that don't want to get after it. That's exactly what it is, right? So for us, we look at it more on a Planet Fitness side, because if you look at it like pound for pound, who has more clientele on a business level? Planet Fitness does, right? Over a big pump iron gym. We need to be able to have inclusion for everybody. So for us, if I have a 73-year-old lady, which we do, if she comes into our academy, she can't do positional rolling. Her body doesn't work like that. If I have a guy who comes in who is very, very down in the dumps on their self-esteem, if I do anything to hurt that self-esteem, I lose that student altogether, and probably jiu-jitsu in general or martial arts in general will lose this person that needs it more so than the alpha male, alpha female. You see where I'm going with this? So what we like to do is we like to cater to the people that need jiu-jitsu more than anybody. The stay-at-home moms that haven't worked out for many years, the guys that work behind cubicles that can't afford to get scratches on their face or anything like that. So for us, what we have seen is when we have people roll, it's a disaster. So I have pinpointed two, and there's other people that say this too. There are two reasons why people quit martial arts in general: egos and injury. So anytime you have anybody spar, whether it's positional sparring or free sparring, egos and injury is your biggest enemy. And that's what make people quit the art. So we try to eliminate that altogether. We try to get this student to understand the culture. They're not getting their egos hurt by just getting smashed and then learning through getting smashed. They're learning sets of techniques. They're learning concepts and principles. And then once they have shown proficiency in those principles and those techniques, that's when they start rolling. That's when they start doing things, because they know how their body works. They know how to move. They're not any risk of injury because they've had the many, many talks of, hey, be calm. We're trying to breathe through this. We're trying to take care of our partner. We want to come and train another day. So that's how we approach it. And I feel like people that approach it more on a let's get them to do rolling sparring, they are catering to something very different.
Okay. So going back to your original example, about the Planet Fitness versus Gold's Gym, a happy medium is something I wrote down. A happy medium.
A happy medium.
A happy medium. Yeah. I come across this because my personal approach, and I don't know if you noticed, like I play devil's advocate on my show where I go between concepts and both sides, but then personally how I run my life and how I run my school is I'm never one-sided. I'm never all white, never all black. I'm always gray. And number one is always safety. On top of everything, it's always been safety. All my black belts, I told them I'd rather have you get through a session. If I have a black one, I only have in Japan, I have 2 black belts under me. I have 1 black belt directly here in Japan teaching my classes sometimes. And whenever he teaches a class, I tell him your number one goal is to get through this and nobody gets hurt. Your number one goal is to get through this, go over whatever curriculum is set for the week, and nobody gets hurt. And if it means it's kind of an uneventful class, since I'm not, especially if I'm not there to supervise it, I would rather have a student come to me and be like, class is a little boring. We do, there was very light contact. He was kind of wrapping us in bubble wrap the whole time. I'd rather have them say that than, oh, so-and-so got injured while you were gone. Yeah. That's so number one approach to safety. Now, the happy medium, the balance we always have to do. And I talked to John Hackelman. If you haven't heard of John Hackelman, that's Chuck Liddell's coach. He runs the Pit. the Pitt franchises, a bunch of Pitt schools all over America. This comes up a lot because John Hackelman, a lot of people view Chuck Liddell and they think of the Pit as this rough and tough place of people with tattoos, drinking and smoking cigarettes and fighting, which is totally the opposite of what John actually is. He's actually all about sobriety and not smoking, and all the opposite. But that's the kind of crowd it attracts. Like the biker gang kind of guy is very attracted to something like UFC Chuck Liddell because they got this like this stigma. Really, it's not even what's happened. It's just an image. So I asked John Hackelman the same thing. Hey, what's going on in your school? So when I went to his school, again, not a big proponent on sparring. He used to, and he'll post the old videos of the Kajukenbo 3-on-1s. So it's him, Liddell, Teixeira, all UFC champions, and Chuck himself is also a kickboxing champ. So all champions, all 3 champions, going at it a black belt test. They're kicking people while they're down. It looks like Pride. You know, it looks like, when I say Pride, not as a concept, like the old school Pride venue. If you haven't heard of that, check it out. Google Pride MMA and you'll see some pretty brutal fights. It looked like that. And he said this was fun at the time for what it was. A bunch of guys in my basement, one of them getting ready for UFC fighting. And we had a great time with this. But when I introduced this to the public, because it still wasn't public, it was still very private. It was him and a small group of lions. As we started this podcast over with the lions. And when he brought that to the public, and he went to they had like a grand opening, and they invited all the other martial arts schools, and they saw that the instructor said, "This is awesome, but you're gonna get sued. Like this isn't gonna last very long for you." And he started thinking about that. And when as he's older now, and he looks at it, and his program is very much the opposite. Not the opposite. He said, keep the mentality, keep the fierceness, teach them self-defense, teach them how to defend themselves. But you do not, in his opinion, some people are going to want to bang, but in general, he said for his general public class, and then he split his classes. You got the fight team, and then you got the Hawaiian Kempo. The Hawaiian Kempo class. So you got the Gold's Gym, you got the Planet Fitness. He decided to say, these are 2 different types of people, and I'm going to keep them separate. And then I'm going to tell the other people, when you go to the Hawaiian Kempo class, everyone has to go to the Hawaiian Kempo class. In other words, everyone has to, kind of what you just said right now, everybody has to experience what it's like to be in the general public and not hurt someone, and go through a program that has a lot of drilling, a lot of drills. Sometimes the drills will be a little more intense, a lot of cardio. It'll push you just as hard. It'll benefit you just as much. And then you'll have your fight team where you can start doing what you need to do. Now, he still limits the banging though, because even in professional fighting, you don't want your fighters getting a concussion or injured in sparring. So he has all these really specific rules. He says never above 5% to the head, never above 5% to the head. And he said, no way. And in some cases, if you fight coming up, to avoid a head injury, stop the punch at the face. If the punch is coming towards the face, that's good enough. You're going to have the reaction speed you need. So it's interesting. Because I mean, that's like your happy medium, right? And he always explained it as the goal of a UFC fighter, if MMA fighter, is to win that title. The goal of someone who's doing martial arts for self-defense is to come home safe to their families. So whatever they're learning is to be able to be applied in that situation. So I think and that's something I'm always thinking about as well. So my program, my Kajukenbo, my family Kajukenbo program, which I tell everyone, you need to at least attend one of those. You can't, even though my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program's here and my Kajukenbo program's here, I tell them you got to attend at least one family Kajukenbo class, which is just a lot of what you just mentioned. A lot of drills. Very nice kids, soccer moms, and a lot of kids. That's the first thing they say when they come in. There's a lot of kids here. I'm like, yeah, you better watch your space because you don't want to hurt anyone. There's a lot of kids here. And it's like, if they can't handle that, I say, well, then maybe you should go somewhere else. If you can't handle, if you can't handle women and children, then maybe you
Yeah,
should.
that's what I tell people all the time. For us, there's other really great academies that offer other things, a different style of jujitsu or different arts than what we do. And if I have a guy that wants to come in and just be a pure MMA fighter, I distinguish. I think that's the right word. I separate the two. I think there's a difference between being an MMA fighter and then being a martial artist. And if you just wanna bang, or if you just wanna roll super duper hard all the time, I would very politely to ask you to go to a different school, because they will offer what you want. I don't want to try to bring you into something that you want nothing to do with, right? So we definitely do the same thing, but I would argue with most people that do come in, even when they want to be fighters, but they give us a chance, they quickly see, oh, being a martial artist is a lot better for me than just being a fighter, because I was that, right? Kind of hearing like what you were saying about John. I grew up in the old school Kajikembo world where like my dad would routinely say, the workout is not over until I see blood on the floor. Yes, yes. Like that was a real thing for us on Kauai. And I watched over the years kind of going, our classes are kind of small. Yeah. But then you would go to like a very mainstream karate school that there was hundreds of kids. You know what I'm saying? So I try to find that line, right, where the fundamental stuff that we do is still just as effective, and still, I mean, it's used at the highest level in the cage, but it's the culture and the way we get somebody there is what counts. Not throw them in a pit of lions and say survive. It's not that at all. It's a, hey, let's raise you up, let's teach you, let's get your body where it needs to be, let's get your mind where it needs to be. And when your self-esteem is up a little bit more, your body's a little bit harder, you're in the groove of things, now we can start adding a little bit more pressure to you. And I mean, like for our MMA fighters, we have champions here, and they go through the exact same thing everybody else goes through. They just use it in the cage in a different environment. So it's a martial artist mindset. That's what we're trying to breed here.
So, all right, we're almost out of time. But yeah, I think a lot of great points were hit here. And then I'm wondering, for anybody watching, how are you doing things at your school? What do you prefer? Put it in the comments. Again, I'm not saying I'm for. Hopefully, throughout this whole conversation, you've kind of seen I've gone. This is something I will be dealing with as long as I'm teaching, and something I've been dealing with since I started doing it. Being the difference between being a martial arts and a fighter. I'm biased towards martial artist because I am now a martial artist. But for me personally, I was a fighter, not a professional fighter. That was never my goal. Professional fighting was never my goal. I ended up doing semi-professional fighting because that's just what happens when you get into this thing. But that's a whole other podcast topic. That's a whole other podcast topic. So, what do you prefer? No sparring, drilling? Because again, I think if I heard you correctly, though, at one point they do start sparring. You're not saying zero sparring. You're just saying
Oh, yes.
no sparring. Let's go back to our little title here. I said in the very beginning, no sparring for white belts. So please keep that in
Right.
mind as you go
Yeah.
forward in the thing. So
Yes, yes.
before I go here, what do you want to wrap up with?
Yeah. The last thing, what I would wrap it up with is, as a person coming into martial arts, whether it's to compete or not to compete, you only have a very short window to fight, to compete. What do you have after that? You've got nothing. So we want to try to preserve our bodies, right? I'm in this boat right now. I have so many injuries that I struggle getting on the mats every day, but it's my job because I wanted to be a fighter. So be a martial artist, learn the entire art. Is there some boring things about it? There is, but it teaches you so much more on your ego, on learning how to defend yourself, learning how to fight, learning how to do all these things. And then guess what? You get to pass it down to people that need it more than you do. You don't need to be this, like, you don't need to have a bunch of belts on your wall, and that's how you show how cool you are. It's how many people you have in your academy growing together. What I think is success is when I come into an academy and I see a huge ton of white belts smiling and laughing and learning. And then I see the upper belts sparring, but they're smiling, they're laughing, they're learning. There's no ego involved in it. And that's the true end goal. And then, like, what I want to try to do is I want to try to be like Grandmaster Elio when I'm in my 90s and I'm still getting on the mat every day, smiling and laughing and teaching and sparring because I took care of my body, because I took care of my ego. That's my goal for my students in my academy, is to have that real white belt mindset, to always learn, but also be very humble and want to be that teacher, not just a fighter.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you for checking out Social Jello with Angelo podcast. Thanks again for coming out and sharing your thoughts here on the show.
Sure.
We're touching on a different topic here, which is training after training in your golden years, preserving your body for older age. I might title a different podcast in the future, Don't Compete After 40. But before I go on a rant on that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for checking out Social Jello with Angelo, at least one of these a week. Catch y'all next time.